So this is one of the most interesting videos I've seen yet from the Russian media monitor. If you're willing to listen to what they say on Russian state TV, you can get some great insight into their thinking. And what they're talking about today is why Russia is cutting undersea cables. And they're gleeful about this and are saying it's a good thing. And you wouldn't believe it, except I'm showing it to you. So let's start before we see this Russian state TV program about them talking about this. Let's look at this. Michael McKay, I highlight him as he shows front line analysis in my daily briefs. The Russian invaders commit acts of war on Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Lithuania by cutting undersea communications cables in the Baltic Sea. Due to the institutionalized cowardice that grips NATO, these member countries are on their own. Russia's divide and conquer works. Now, Finland has stepped up, to their credit, to apprehend that ship. And if they prosecute the captain here, it'll be a lot harder for other captains to say, yes, I want to do that as well. Jay in Kyiv says Russia finally admitting that they're the ones cutting Western undersea cables should be news, but there really isn't anything that Putin can do that will ever yield a true response. Russia and China would be stupid not to destroy Western civilization with this level of weakness. That's the way that they see it. So let's go to the Russian media monitor and see what we see. Special thanks as always to the Russian media monitor for the great work that they do. Please see Russian media monitor if you want to see more. All right, here we are. The government of Finland has seized the tanker Eagle S in the Baltic that was traveling from St. Petersburg to Egypt under the flag of the Cook Islands. The Finns insist that the ship is part of Russia's so-called shadow fleet. Also, the ship supposedly had something to do with the damage caused to an undersea cable. For this reason, the Finnish Coast Guard sailed the vessel to Finnish waters and boarded it. The scandal started 2 days earlier, during Catholic Christmas, when power supply between Finland and Estonia was interrupted due to damage to an undersea cable on the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Now, the Eagle S just happened to be going over that precise spot at exactly the time when the cable was cut. So it's pretty clear that Eagle S was involved. In Helsinki, they immediately started to talk of sabotage and started a joint investigation with Estonia. The Finnish media spiced it up. Supposedly, at the time of the incident, there were 2 vessels near that undersea cable. One of them was a Chinese ship under the flag of Hong Kong. Journalists believe it was responsible for destroying a Baltic connector gas pipeline last year. The second ship was the same Eagle S. The tanker is under control of the police in Finnish waters. According to law enforcement, the cable was damaged with the ship's anchor. The Finnish border guards who inspected the ship said that the anchor was missing from its chain. The captain of Eagle S is currently the main suspect. A similar incident took place earlier in December. At that time, the Finns had discovered a broken internet cable between Sweden and Finland. The incident was detected ashore in 2 places near Helsinki. 6,000 Finnish families were left without internet. The Finnish police stated their suspicions that the breakage was intentional. They were pointing a finger at Moscow in November, when 2 underwater fiber optic cables were cut in the Baltic Sea. One of them was between Lithuania and Sweden, and another was between Finland and Germany. So now they're going to get into their analysis. I have a question with respect to an incredible similarity of this story with the story about Novichok, the poisoning. Yes, about Novichok, a horrible, deadly poison that can poison half the earth, that the Russians are spreading everywhere. And yet, no one died from it. In this instance, the Russians and the Chinese are cruising around with dropped anchors in the waters of the Baltic and nowhere else. Actually, it's not nowhere else, and making fun of it doesn't make it go away. It actually happened just outside Taiwan just a couple days ago, and that's a suspicious incident as well, in the hopes that the anchor will hook onto some cable, leaving the anchor behind, although as far as I know, an anchor is not the most useless thing on a ship. How would you answer my questions about the most recent incident? Honestly speaking, I view the latest incident as a deliberate destruction of a cable in the spot where the said vessel was traveling. The anchors are never lowered. That is the first thing. Okay, so at least he's in reality and not denying that they're doing that. But wait for it. It gets worse. Secondly, all navigation maps in existence and all the software used by the vessels traveling there show the location of the cables. Forgive me, But it is not that simple to tear an anchor off its chain. How dumb would a saboteur have to be to do this? That's why I mentioned Novichok. It's the same story all over again. Okay, so let's start with lesson 1. When the Russians do these kind of things, whatever they're doing, they point the finger at their opponent and accuse them of doing it. They re-victimize the victim by saying that the victim is the person victimizing, if that makes sense. Why is it stupid? To the contrary, it's a beautiful story. Wait a minute, what? We're traveling. We accidentally dropped our anchor and accidentally hit a cable. For what though? I would understand it if Europe was left with no electricity for 3 weeks. That I would understand. Here, just a few thousand people were left with no lights. You aren't talking about the same thing. Pardon me, but the damage to this latest cable means disruption of energy supply between Finland and Estonia for at least 7 months. Is Helsinki left without electricity? Are they freezing? No, they aren't freezing. Then what's the point of doing it? To create problems for them, and it's causing problems. Now, he's admitting that it's creating problems for them, it's causing problems. He already admitted that this has been intentional, and he's a deputy foreign minister, the guy that was speaking. Like, okay, from the very beginning, I disagree with the description. This is a State Duma member now talking. These stories are not about the pirates. These are clearly military stories. At a certain point in time for us, the Baltic Sea became a theater of military operations. Okay, this is a member of parliament making that argument. This was unavoidable. For us, for our country, this is a historic goal. Right now, we are carrying out one task, liberating the Black Sea. In fact, they've been liberated from the Black Sea, and they've tucked tail and run off to the Caspian Sea so that they're not getting hit by Ukrainian seaborne drones. As a maritime power of the Black Sea, if NATO's plans were realized with Ukraine and Georgia, it would have become practically eliminated. We would have only one Black Sea port in Novorossiysk. They already done the same with the Baltic Sea. Let's not delude ourselves. Now, let's talk about that. The Baltic Sea wasn't like that before. The Baltic Sea was some NATO presence, and then Sweden and Finland joined as a consequence of the war in Ukraine, but it wasn't, they were neutral before that. This is NATO's internal sea. There is a small Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg on the Gulf. They shut the window Peter the Great had opened into Europe. Well done. They slammed it shut. Our goal is to liberate the Baltic Sea for ourselves. Whoa, that's the goal? So is that what's driving what's going on here? Let's listen. This is a theater of military operations. What's happening is an escalation. They're saying it, but we don't seem to pay attention that that's what's actually happening in response to Ukraine's aggressive actions. So they're saying this is a aggressive military action as a response to Ukraine. Our people say, let's inflict damage upon NATO. For example, let's cut their cables. Here you go, we're cutting them. Did you read Dmitry Medvedev today? He authored the framework about Europe. He wrote that Europe is bloodthirsty. Again, with the weird mirroring effect. Europe's the bloodthirsty one, but you've attacked Ukraine, who was not attacking you. I can't recall his adjectives verbatim. They are so colorful. Bloodthirsty Europe has been nurturing all of this. When the war ends, we'll have to devote all efforts to make sure Europe suffers. Now, look, they're saying this. They're saying this for a reason on national TV, like a state-sponsored media, saying that Europe is bloodthirsty, Europe must suffer. This is a military action. It's clear, and these are not slouches either. A deputy foreign minister, a member of the Duma, yes, to punish Europe. Right, but how? He's calling on us to organize the protests by migrants. So now we're talking about weaponizing migrant migration into Europe to cause problems, to encourage them. Yes, encourage it. I think we need the money within our own country. He practically wrote, let's destroy their cables and do all sorts of other things. Go ahead and finish your thought. We can make the Baltic Sea our own, only on land. Naval battles would not help us. We need a part of the Baltic coast. Okay. This is why the Baltic states and Poland are arming, preparing barriers, sounding the alarm. They're nervous that Russia actually might be serious about the propaganda that they're spewing to their own people right now. Are they serious or are they not? Open question, but they're saying it. Wouldn't it be easier to sink ships? Alexander, the Balts will watch you and get scared. We need the Sabotage Gap from Kaliningrad to Leningrad. Okay, what is he talking about, the Sabotage Gap? I did a video about that almost 2 years ago. What is the Sabotage Gap? I'll post it at the end if you're interested in it. But it's essentially, the Sabotage Gap is this connection between Belarus and Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad is this outgrowth that nobody wanted after World War II. The Lithuanians didn't want it. The Poles didn't want it because it wasn't Lithuanians or Poles that were there. It was Germans. And so Russia took it, and it's on the border. That's Kaliningrad. And then this area between Belarus, Kaliningrad, is the Sabotage Gap. So that's what they're talking about. They're talking about a hot war with NATO by taking this. What is the norm? What? This is normal logic. I understood you, but this is clearly not something that will happen tomorrow or the next day. But he's not saying that's something that should not happen. We're provoking them to an escalation of a situation in the Baltic Sea so that we have something to respond to. So let's get ahead and invade Estonia, right? Now, this is a research fellow at the Russian Academy of Sciences that asked that. No, why just Estonia? Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania? That's the Baltic states. Yes, excellent. You'll get into the islands by the end of the program. Let's not waste time on small things. We shouldn't overestimate our strength or underestimate the strength of the opponent, like we did at the beginning of the special operation. This should be the golden standard, to look at what happened so that it won't happen again. Not all that shines is gold. Okay, what did we just watch there? There's clearly talk of escalation. They're claiming that they did it. They're saying we should do more. And this is for consumption of Russians because it's Russian state media. Okay, I want to end with this. What is this? Why are these cables important? What's happening in Europe and the world, and how submarine cables work and why they matter? Okay, 95% of global internet traffic relies on submarine cables. Submarine cables are fiber optic pipelines stretching across the ocean floor, connecting continents and carrying most of the world's internet and phone and military communications. How they work. Data travels through thin strands of glass inside these cables using light signals to transmit massive amounts of information at nearly the speed of light. A single cable can handle terabytes of data per second, the equivalent of millions of HD streaming videos. Now, why isn't cable damage catastrophic? Well, most regions have multiple cables for redundancy, so if one is cut, traffic to others is rerouted. So, for example, Europe's dense cable network ensures only minor slowdowns if one fails. But it might be different in different regions. How many cables are there? There are about 400 active submarine cables worldwide spanning 1.3 million kilometers. There are major hubs like the Atlantic and the Pacific, and then there's places like the Baltic. Now, repair times. Let's talk about repair times. Fixing a cable typically takes a few days in shallow seas like the Baltic or weeks in deep oceans like the Atlantic. Weather, location, and the extent of the damage all play a role in this process, and this is what a cable looks like on the ship as they're putting this out. Okay, so that's about the cables, but this wasn't about cables. This is about what the Russians are projecting on state media to their population about how the Europeans are the aggressors and we ought to escalate more. They took credit for this. So why anybody is going, I don't know, did the Russians do this? Is this really because of them? They're admitting it. So if you want to follow up and learn more about the Sabotage Gap, I'll link that here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.